So how can you make sure that in this tense situation, you can still focus on growth?
Sad reality is you cannot make sure. There's no guarantees in life apart from one, and that's the day you die.
This is Next Spark. I'm Aamir Shehzad, and with me I have Shahid Afzal. Shahid Afzal is a business consultant, a mentor, and an entrepreneur. Please tell us about yourself, your experience, and something unique about yourself.
Good afternoon, Aamir. Thank you for having me. This is a unique experience for me already. It's the first time I'm doing something like this. Briefly about me, I grew up in the United Kingdom since I was two. My parents came from Pakistan. I spent 22 years with Citigroup, a global bank in 3 different continents. My background is IT. And in the last 6 years of my career with the bank, I got out of IT, went to corporate strategy. So I was responsible for managing the strategy of the bank, process improvement, innovation, product cross-selling, and contingency planning.
Interesting.
In 2003, I left the bank, came to Bahrain and joined 2 ex-colleagues of mine from the bank. We started a management consulting company. And since that time, we have been consultants to government entities, to large corporates in the region, to family-owned businesses, and to small businesses as well. So that's been a major learning curve as well. And last 2 years, I have really worked on my own because my partners, for various reasons, want to retire. I still want to continue. And I have been working with banks, and also now I'm working for an IT company which is from Australia, and they're in different geographies. Right now they want to expand in the UK, so I'm helping them with their expansion plans and with their corporate governance.
Great.
Something unique about me, you said?
Yes.
I have a criminal record.
Wow.
It's something that happened when I was 19. I was with 3 friends. We were coming back late from a club, and they stopped. They picked up some rubber cones and flashing lights that you get on roadworks. We were stopped by the police. Next day, we were put into the court.
Wow.
We had our fingerprints already taken, and we found guilty, charged £10. It was in the local paper, and it was a very shameful experience for me at that time. But on reflection, it was one of the most important things, and it was a good that it happened to me because it made me realize that you can be anywhere in the world and you could be there in terms of the right time or the wrong time, and good or bad things can happen to you. And it's a question of how do you then take that forward? Do you take responsibility or do you become the victim? And I would always say, people, take the responsibility, stop pointing the finger at somebody else, and take accountability to move forward.
And that is the reason why I keep asking you for advice. I believe you're a mentor to me, and your wisdom and knowledge, I'm sure others can take benefit of this as well. So we're going to discuss today that how businesses can steer through these challenging times by building meaningful relationships with their partners and colleagues, and by adding value to one another. Mm-hmm. And how important it is to have well-defined values, which again helps you create a culture, especially in this time.
From my perspective, culture is the glue that actually holds everything together. And that's where your core values come into it. And a lot of organizations have got core values and they talk about culture. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But culture is very, very important. Right now, most organizations, regardless of their size, are firefighting. They're in crisis mode. They're looking at how to cut costs, how to maintain their cash flow, how to generate income. And it is a very painful process that people are going through. And it's a sad reality that people's livelihoods are actually being impacted in a way that probably hasn't happened before. So as organizations do that, the concern that I have for them is that they will get lost in the details of the crisis mode. and not keep an eye what they should be doing in the long term. Because crisis doesn't happen once. We've had the pandemic now, and I think it's something that will continue to be with us for an indefinite period. Number two is that if you go back to 2009, you had the global financial crisis. And before that, in 1987, you had the stock market crash. The 1930s had significant stock crashes, economic downturn.
But this is a different time. I mean, if you look at all those market crashes, this is a different situation. Yes, there's a market crash, and we were thinking that the businesses are picking up, and now we read the news that a lot of governments, they are locking down again. So there's a second wave which is going on, which means this situation is here to stay. And it is important for businesses to think about their survival. Yes, values and cultures, it's very important. But at the same time, right now, the question is the survival of those businesses.
Look, the survivals of the businesses every day, even in normal times, because there's always another competitor out there that is coming to and is going to take part of your lunch, if not all of it. So that has always been there. It's compounded, of course, because of the absolute, what I call, stoppage of any economic and business activities. That's what happened. So now, as they're coming back in, the question is that organizations have to realize that we can have stops and starts until maybe a vaccine comes out. And when that vaccine comes out, is it actually going to work? We don't know. So organizations have to look at the short term, but they have to look at the long term. The reason they need to do that is because going forward, they have to become scalable. There's no doubt about it in my mind.
That is true, but how can you focus on growth? How can you focus on possibilities of the future? Yes, I understand there are a lot of opportunities which this situation brings, and we are in that sector where I see those opportunities. But there are many other businesses in different segments where they are struggling. So how can you make sure that in this tense situation, you can still focus on growth?
Sad reality is you cannot make sure. There's no guarantees in life apart from one, and that's the day you die. Other than that, there are no guarantees in business. So what you can only do is to look at the risks that are there and how quickly can you adapt. To give you an example, if an organization has got very specific goals that it had put together for 2020, they need to reevaluate those goals and to determine, are they still realistic? Now, if you are going to only look at the bottom line, then forget about your core values and your culture. Because if your goal was to make 100 million dinars, and you can still do that by cutting costs, which means you are absolutely going to lay people off, you're going to reduce their benefits and salary, that's a moral question, right?
I mean, it's
a moral question. Why would you not take the other route and say, instead of making 100 million, I'm going to target 50 million, but I will not let those people go. I may still ask them to reduce certain benefits for a time, but we can then have longevity of the business. Maybe we can use that money to reinvest, to look at different opportunities, but we maintain the longevity of the organization, and you are not doing major surgery. But how many organizations will look in the mirror and forego the bottom line and look at it alternatively? I really want to know. I really don't have any data at the moment, but it's a question that I do ask. You as an owner, if you have revalidated, or if myself, one action that I could take is to reduce my own benefits and salary.
For sure.
Or say, I won't take any payments for the next few months, but I will continue to make sure that my employees are paid. I continue to make sure that some of the suppliers that I deal with, I may not be able to give them 100%, but I tell you what, I'll give them 100% over a longer period. So instead of paying on a 30 days or 60 days, I'm going to say to them, guys, I can pay you 20% every month or 30% or 50%. And I can do it over a longer period. So you start to look at all these different ways of handling your cash flow, handling your income and expense. So there are ways of doing that. But the problem is that people will get lost in those details. They will not then take a deep breath, come out and look at, well, what is the longer term plan that I should be looking at? And part of that is strategy, and part of that is your cultural. So if your cultural, again, going back, are not aligned, you're not going to have that. You're just going to worry about the bottom line. And I have an issue with that. I really do. I think it's time that we really all started to look and saying, what is the point of us coming to work? What is the point of us doing business? Is it really only to make money? If it is, then if you've got your corporate values, then drop them. Forget about them. Just be honest and say, we're here to make business, to money only, and nothing else counts. At least you're being honest with yourself, at least you're being honest with other people. But if those core values are important to you, then you need to really revalidate that now in the short term as well as the long term.
But when you're looking at the values and when you're trying to define the culture, it's not a short-term process. It takes time. These are the time when you need to make decisions, short-term decisions, which will of course have an impact for your long-term strategy.
Right.
So you cannot put together your culture in a month or two. I mean, it's a long-term process.
It is. But again, it goes back. If your core values are important and you want to live by them, then you better align what you're going to do in the short term. If they don't matter to you, then take your drastic surgical knife and do whatever you want in terms of cutting costs and impacting people's life. Can you sleep with that at night? If you can, then that's between you and your God, right? So you have to do short-term crisis management, but you shouldn't get lost in it. If every day you're coming in and you're managing crisis after crisis, then there's a big question mark in terms of the viability of your business. Crisis management, something has happened, you take A, B, C. Let's take an example. You know that at the moment you've got cash flow and you can survive for 6 months. You can ask an employees and yourself to take a 20% cut. That may give you 9 months. Okay, so you've taken the short term. Now you should also look at, well, what am I going to do past the 9 months? What can I do? Is the reality that I can't do anything? Or is the reality I can do things, and maybe that's the time to look at your cultural values again? So it's a combination of factors. I agree, you have to put the fire out. But if you're having a fire every single day, which may be happening, you've got to question why. If you keep putting fires out, then something fundamentally is wrong. Some of it is in your control, some of it is out of your control. So what can you do that is in your control? Because there's other things that you cannot do.
What changes do you think the businesses will have to make to the operations or strategy, not just to survive, but to grow and to scale, for next few years?
The most important aspect in terms of where we are today and going forward for the next foreseeable future for any organization is scalability. You have to be able to scale up and you have to be able to scale down. And you have to be able to do it very quickly. If it's going to take time to scale up or down, then you're going to get hurt in the process. And again, I wish there was a magic wand that would say, no, do A, B, C, D. The only thing that I can do is to probably share some aspects of scalability. The most important factor in scalability is your strategic vision. You need to look at it, you need to look at the big picture. And that is what owners and executive management, they've got to go back and look at their strategic picture to say, is this what we want? And is it viable? Is it the right thing to do? Yes, we're going to have fires and we're going to have challenges, but is this the right thing still to do? That big picture. So that starts with the leaders and the executive management. Second, cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. You have got to have the ability to get that cash flow in. For some organizations, it may be already too late because of the situation. But in a lot of countries, governments have come to the aid. They have brought some kind of programs to help businesses so that people don't get laid off. For example, in Bahrain, with the electricity payments, that's been deferred. Some of the landlords are deferring or scaling down how much an organization needs to pay them on a rental basis, but that's done through dialogue, correct? And in terms of also keeping Bahrainis or your workforce, that needs to be looked at. So you need to take advantage of that. Hindsight is, of course, sad, but take your own organization. Maybe when you looked at your cash flow 6 months ago, you said, yeah, I've got enough cash flow. I don't have any loans or overdrafts. But maybe on reflection, it would have been good if you at least had that already arranged so that if things did get tough, you could still weather a longer period.
We had very aggressive plans for this year, but I still feel comfortable that we did not have to let go anyone. So we will make sure that we improvise, we adjust to the situation, and probably we look at the opportunities this time bring. And I believe that we are going to stick with our team, which gives me a great comfort. And certainly probably in next year, we will go back and look again on scaling.
Okay. But look, that's the fact is that you've looked at for your own organization, but you have focused more on the opportunity rather than the cost cutting. I'm sure you've looked at both. But again, a lot of organizations will fall into cost cutting mode and make that the bigger area where they need to focus on rather than the opportunities. And that's what I'm saying. There are opportunities out there, particularly right now, in many ways that you can do different things. So scalability means the strategic big picture, which is the sole responsibility of the owners or the executive management and the board. That's it. No one else takes responsibility for that. Number 2 is the cash flow. How can you manage that? How can you leverage that? Number 3 is alignment with your team. Have you got the right people in? Have you involved them? Involve them in terms of coming up with ideas and suggestions, opportunities, as well as areas that maybe you could do things better using technology as much as possible. So that's another important factor. And then, of course, leadership. Leadership comes back into this because if you really want to take your business forward, even in these challenging times, then you as a leader have to grow much faster than what your growth is. To give you an example, if you want to grow your business by 50%, you should grow by 60 to 70%. Because you are the one that's going to have to lead, motivate, create the energy, and create that passion in your team. And if you can do that, then your team will follow. Will 100% of them follow? Hopefully, yes, but more than likely, no. But if you get a core few, how revolutions are started, who believe in it, then they will bring the rest. Because most people are like sheep, and excuse me, I don't mean to be derogatory, but they will be at this scale. You have those who are going to be absolutely against the change, those are absolutely committed, and the vast majority of 60%, which will go whichever way the wind goes.
True.
All right?
True.
So that's important. And then in terms of execution, that's where I say the magic happens. You've got the big picture. If you've been able to address your cash flow, stop the bleeding, if you have been able to align your team, if you've been, as a leader, grown and you can lead them, then you can lead them and the team through the execution where it all stitches together. It is not a painless. You are going to feel the pains. But again, it goes back. How are you going to adapt to it? How are you going to improvise to it? These are all different things of that. So scalability, how quickly you can adapt. Again, look for the opportunities rather than the simple cost cutting.
I completely agree with that. I think the moment you start looking at the opportunities, you will find wherever you put your conscious focus and attention, you will create those opportunities, or probably the opportunities will be created for you. And I've personally experienced that even in this time. Now, there are changes which you make consciously, talking about scalability, talking about your future strategy. But then, when I look at most of the organizations, everyone was very switched on their digitization. But the process of that and the speed was very slow. And I believe pandemic has really accelerated. So there's another opportunity here,
Yes.
Which probably, it's in the benefit of the business.
Yeah, so this goes back to, as a leader of an organization, reacting to actual crisis or creating a perceived crisis. And because if you look out and you can, it takes time to reflect and saying, well, market conditions today are fine. Well, at the present moment, of course, they're not fine. But if you look out, do you see tsunamis coming? Do you see an earthquake coming? How are you going to address it? And if you are able to look at that, looking at the industry sectors, looking at the technological advances that are coming in, then if there isn't an actual crisis, you create a crisis. And that's what British Airways did in the 1980s. They were very profitable, but the management knew that competition was going to come in, deregulation is going to come in. So they created a perceived crisis within British Airways to streamline their operations and do other strategic initiatives. That is key. Digitization, technology is key. For example, today, in virtually every single industry that I can think of, you need to sign documents, correct? Health, law, banking, aerospace, oil and gas. At the end, somebody has to sign off, whether it's a checklist, whether it's a contract, whatever it is, whether it's a leave request.
True.
So digitization can help you there, because if you can offload a lot of things that are self-service to employees, you can also today, with products out there, that you can say, I'm sending you that contract. You don't need to print it out. Sign it electronically. And today, governments and the legal infrastructure is now moving towards digital acceptance of documents. Email was not accepted maybe 10 years ago. Well, today email is the source for people to look at when it comes to disputes, because that's where the documentation is. That's where you've had the discussion. WhatsApp is another area. So all the social media discussions that you've had as a corporation is out there. So digitization, using tools that can improve your workflows, working remotely more in certain industries. If you take the healthcare, you can't work remotely. Particularly if you're working in a clinic or health, you can, in certain countries like Sweden and Finland, they're using remote technology or remote video conferencing where a doctor will talk to the patient. But if you want to perform surgery and this and that, you can have to have somebody, or you use robotics to do that through surgery. So that is clearly something that's going to go forward.
I'm sure there are a lot of businesses who are going to shut down, but there are people, I'm sure, out there who will take advantage of this time and they will identify opportunities. So what would be the key factor between the two?
You're correct. It is a sad fact that there will be businesses that will shut down, and it will have an impact, unfortunately, on people's lives. That is a reality, and that's where you need organizations to look how best to manage that. Secondly, if there are governments that can help in terms of retraining, reskilling, providing other opportunities, it's a combination of things. It's not just one element that will fix it. But in terms of those organizations that will have the best opportunity to come out of this, and particularly not just in the immediate future, but I would say for the foreseeable future, is really scalability. And that is, we've touched on that. But
you have a lot of emphasis on scalability.
Yes, a lot, because the reason is that if you are not able to scale up or down without major surgery, then you're going to be forever in a crisis mode. So it'll go back when you look at what your big picture is and all the elements that are related to scalability, your cash flow, aligning the team, your leadership and execution. You have to have that. And that is something that must be monitored as you go along. Because changes to your business sometimes will be in your control and other times they're out of your control. Pandemic is one example of that. Legislation is another. Customer changes. So you're reacting. So if you are able to react quickly, which means you can scale up or down very quickly, or if you can create a value that creates momentum in the market or your geography, then again, that allows you to scale up or down. So you have to have that ability to do that. And you have to utilize tools and technology in the best way, and you have to utilize people in the best way. So that scalability is key going forward. There is a moral aspect to that scalability, what's it driven by? It goes back to your culture of the organization and the corporate values. If that is not aligned in practice, then again, the likelihood that you surviving, in my view, is going to be very, very difficult. How do you translate that into something that is meaningful to each organization is the difficult part, because each organization, small, big, medium, or large, has to look and determine each of those factors. In your business today, you have to look at your big picture. Is it still valid? Is it, yeah, I believe in it, and I'm believing in it because the indicators, and you know your industry, you know your customers, you know the region. Yes, there is a viable business opportunity there, and I can take opportunity of that. So that's why I keep harping on about scalability. It is really the only name of the game today.
So I think the two elements to take out from this is scalability and adaptability, probably in this time, how quick you can adopt agility.
Yes.
And then reflecting to your core values.
Yes.
That whatever you're doing, if it is aligned with the values which you believe in. Thank you very much. It has been very insightful for me personally. I think I've learned several new things. It was an amazing session today, and I'm sure people who are watching this video, they've learned a lot as well. So kindly share with us your best pick from this video and something which you have done in this time, in this challenging situation, something which you've done to keep yourself motivated and positive. Thank you very much.